As you saw in the press release earlier today, I'll just reiterate, at 6 p.m. last night, officers responded to a 911 call to 155 Hospital Street here in Augusta for a report of a male subject with a knife and an altercation that was happening. After an immediate response, the officers arrived on scene to find one victim at that location. Immediately after that, they were drawn to another subject who was brandishing a knife. An armed confrontation ensued at that point, at which time Officer Sabastian Guptill, Sergeant Chris Blodgett had that armed confrontation with this individual. As a result, unfortunately, 34-year-old Dustin Parody of Augusta passed away at the scene. Rescue crews responded, obviously, along after that with the Attorney General's office, Augusta police detectives, and Maine State Police investigators as well, and the investigation ensued after that. As you know from the release, that standard protocol, the officers were placed on administrative leave immediately after, and pending the results of the investigation, will dictate where we go from there. So I'll entertain any questions that everybody has at this time.
Have you ever had any encounters with Mr. Parody in the past, any officers?
Not that I'm aware of personally. Obviously, that's going to be part of the investigation, that they'll unravel every piece of information. There's a ton of evidence that was to be collected. There were witnesses at the scene, video recordings, that type of thing. So that will be all part of what goes into that investigation. Great question.
Can you give any more information on the actual events of that incident that led up to when the officers arrived and when the shots were fired?
Other than exactly what I explained, the call was an altercation between some folks, a male brandishing a knife. It was almost immediately after them coming into contact was when the armed confrontation ensued. Obviously, they used their firearms, and there was a knife involved with Mr. Parody. So that's the details that I have at this time, and obviously every other aspect of this will come out and certainly be part of the Attorney General's report to you folks when it's complete.
A relative is telling us that the man had autism and that he was in a mental health crisis. I just wonder, are your people, was there any negotiating going on?
Yeah, that's not anything I was aware of, but I can tell you, based upon the preliminary information that I have, it was something that happened immediate. We do actually have a mental health worker that works with us. He was working that night, and I can tell you that by the time the call came in and by the time this incident was over, he did not have time to get to that response. It was that immediate and that grave of a situation of what was happening.
In relation to that, this obviously is the fourth shooting involving police in the last 3 weeks, concerning, for the public. And I guess, can you share what it's like on the streets for your officers? Because it seems as though, everybody's either mentally ill, in crisis, or deranged.
Well, that's a great question, and you're right. I can tell you, just this year alone, you want to, talk about the pandemic or the change in what's happening with everything going on, and I can't agree with you more, Keith. This situation, it seems like there are more and more events happening. You look statewide, you look in the city of Augusta, you look at what we've been dealing with since kind of COVID broke a little bit and everybody's gone back. Summertime, call it July on, our calls have increased exponentially, and the danger's even worse now too. So I don't know what the cause of all of this is, but I can tell you that's real and true, that we're seeing more and more dangerous calls at this time in what we're dealing with.
A lot of police officers are trained to deal with situations like this peacefully. It sounds like in this case, to start negotiating. I don't want to put words in
Sure.
Is that kind of what happened?
Well, yeah, it'd be a little bit premature for me to say one way or the other. I know that they'll have the timing down. They'll have every part of this will be dissected, if you will, and put into that investigation. So I think it's a little early, but we'll certainly have those answers and respond accordingly as far as that goes. So good question. Right here, this lady here.
Just wondering a couple things. One, where would de-escalation come in a situation like this, especially if you did know
Sure.
Not knowing all the facts again, but where
Yeah.
where would that come
Yeah, great question. Where would de-escalation come in immediately? You know, when you come onto the scene like that, all officers are trained in de-escalation. We have officers trained in crisis as a crisis intervention team, if you will, through the National Alliance of the Mentally Ill. They provide that training to us. So obviously that is an immediate type of situation where that would kick in when you're responding to that. Whether you know there's any mental health involved or not, that is going to kick in if there's time to do that. So good question, sir.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that there's been a lot more dangerous calls in recent months. Have you had any conversations, with your officers in the field, to kind of go over a different strategy to de-escalate these situations, or has anything like that happened?
Well, unfortunately, we have obviously discussed that as a collective group, but we have no control over that. We're the ones who are left with those calls. If I could dictate the types of calls to send to my officers to, the non-dangerous ones, I'd send them every time. But, these particular situations, we have to respond. And obviously we have to respond in such a way with our training and experience and policies and procedures. So nothing in that respect has changed in our response, but certainly those conversations of this kind of change and the call volume, the nature of calls, and the dangerousness.
Was anybody injured in the original altercation before your officer?
Yes. We have another individual who was transported to the hospital, who we haven't disclosed his name at this time, but he was part of the original altercation and went to the hospital for that non-life-threatening injuries.
Maybe I missed this, but is that a homeless shelter? Was this inside or outside?
Inside, and it's the Bread of Life Ministries, Shelter 155. Hospital Street.
Is that the building on the left or the right?
Left.
The big one.
The big one.
Was he staying there? Was Mr. Perry
Yes.
staying there?
Yes, he's a resident there.
Do you anticipate any charges against the other person involved?
The preliminary investigation wouldn't be any charges at this time, but obviously, through the dissection of this and the situation, but the information that I have is there's no charges pending at this time. He would be listed as the victim in this case.
Was this Officer Guptill's second officer-involved shooting?
It is, yeah. He's been on with our department for almost 4 years now, and this is now his second. The other individual, Chris Blodgett, is the patrol sergeant. He was running the shift at the time. He's a 15-year veteran of our department, but it would be Chris's first and Sebastian's second.
How many officer-involved shootings has your department had in recent years? Do you see that's a trend that's happening, that's going on?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I've been here 23 years. I've been the chief since 2018, and we had an officer-involved shooting when I was the deputy chief. Just before that, in 2016, we've had the next one was in 2019, and now we have this one. We went years before, many years, almost a decade before that. But over the last, 5 years, 6 years, those have been the numbers for us.
In a situation like that, would officers maybe consider using a taser?
Certainly that if that's at your disposal, not all officers carry a taser, but if that was deemed necessary at that point, that will be revealed in the investigation too, having gone through that and looked at what the totality of the circumstances are.
Why don't all officers carry a taser?
Sometimes not enough. If we have officers working, there could be a number of reasons. If there's a malfunction, I don't know if the officers were carrying a taser at the time, so I don't want to be premature in that. But I can tell you from a day-to-day operations standpoint, not everybody carries one. Most do. But again, these types of situations too, where it may be something that could be used, certainly not, in a deadly force type of situation. You're not going to revert to a less than lethal tactic to meet that force on force. But that's kind of an inside look at how we work.
Do you know roughly how long the AG investigation is? Are your officers basically off the streets until it's over?
No, in years past, it was kind of a timely thing, but there's such a backlog with what's happening right now with the AG's investigation that basically we run what you will, an internal investigation at the same time, and then based upon our investigation that runs in conjunction with the AG's investigation, ours is done before theirs traditionally. I mean, if it's something that it is done in a timely fashion, we would certainly wait for that. But where we are in 2021 with the backlog, you could be waiting a year to 2 years for that type of report to come out.
How long would the officers be out?
Traditionally, in my past experience, a minimum of 30 days. There's a battery of things that we do for them. Obviously, our own crisis folks and our counseling folks that they have working with them. There's psychiatrists involved, and there's a battery of things that we do to make sure if they come back on the road that they're prepared to do that.
And this might be a dumb question, sorry.
No such
if I
thing.
missed it. The reason the two are off is because we don't know which bullet was the one that...
That's not accurate. Nope. All I can tell you is both fired their weapons in the line of duty, so that is why they're off. The investigation will reveal, who shot where, who did the detail. It will reveal the details, but that's not why they're off. Anytime you discharge your weapon in the line of duty in a deadly force situation, that's why it's a paid administrative leave until we can, certainly, like I said, there's the investigation piece, but there's also to make sure your officers are prepared and they have what they need to come back on the road and work.
Do you know why the victim in this case got upset in the first place? What was happening there?
Yeah, I don't know any of those details. I'm quite positive that the investigators know that, but I don't have that information at this time.
Do you know how many shots were fired?
I do not. But that will obviously be revealed as well. The two people, can you be more specific?
The person who was killed and the person who was dealing with
I believe that they do know each other, yes.
Is that person who was taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, sorry if I missed this,
Yep.
also staying at the shelter?
I can't say with 100% certainty, but they were, based upon the altercation and the preliminary report to dispatch, that's how it came in. So, and obviously that will come out with the details and that type of thing.